Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cast YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're going to be embarking on our mock draft 3.0 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Once again, we're going to be using Walk the Mock for this draft. Really nice tool if you're looking for something you enjoy doing this in your free time. Highly recommend it. I've really enjoyed using it the last couple weeks, so we're going to keep with that. And with that said, we're going to go through some parameters first. But after that, we're going to hop right into this draft. So, first thing I want to talk about is going to be trades. So, I find it very unlikely for us to be moving in the first round of the draft. And the reason why is because, as far as trading up, I don't think that makes too much sense for the Jaguars unless you see a really good player falling into like the early 20s. Like, for example, say that Peter Skoronski falls really far when he's supposed to be a guy who could go around like 11 or 12. If something like that happens, then we'd absolutely consider making a move. But unless it's a move like that, that's worth a lot of value, then we're probably going to be staying put. And why we're not trading back is because we won't get offers from the other teams on here. Just the way it works, you have to initiate all the trade offers yourself. So with that said, there's not really going to be a whole ton of movement unless we're looking to trade up in the later rounds of this draft. And I think that's the best thing they could do anyway. I could see on day 2, if they wanted to trade into like the early 40s, like a really good player's falling, I think that would be a fantastic move. And I think with the amount of talent you have in this draft, you could see a really good player that you could have even considered in the first round. Maybe not the best option in the first round, but still in the talk, I guess. You could see the team move up into the early 40s for that. So maybe that's a move we make. Now, once again, like we talked about the last time, the focus for us is going to be drafting the best prospect instead of drafting the biggest need. And that's more so a guideline rather than a constraint. Because say that 2 prospects, you just consider them to be really great players for the team, but one of them's a bigger need, then maybe you go with the one who's a bigger need. So it depends on the situation, but for the most part, we don't want to be reaching for players that just fit a need rather than the best player available. And so that's kind of how we're going to treat this. As far as ideal picks for the first round, where I stand on it right now, there's really 2 guys for me that I think could realistically drop to 24 that I'm having a hard time really choosing a favorite between. And those 2 players are Brian Branch and O'Cyrus Torrence. Because both of those players, one of them, or actually not one of them, both of them I think could very fairly be selected in the middle of the teens. I think that's very possible. Brian Branch, the way he went out of college and what he did as a player his last year, the whole time, he was fantastic. And he's a dream fit for this team, but he's also a dream fit for a lot of other teams. And even if he makes it into the 20s, I could see him being snagged right before by a team like maybe the Vikings that needs a lot of defensive help. So we could see stuff like that. But I think the more likely player of those 2 to fall, even though I think he's worth just about as much, is O'Cyrus Torrence. And the reason why I say that is because Torrence is a guard. But hey, at the same time, Branch is a slot corner. So maybe you don't value that a ton either if you're most other franchises. But O'Cyrus Torrence, another fantastic prospect for his position. I think he's a fantastic fit with Jacksonville, just like Branch. So with Branch, essentially what you're doing is you're getting a player that is the best in this entire class in the slot right off the bat. You're taking what's arguably your biggest need on the defense and turning into one of the biggest strengths, and it could be the biggest strength. Branch is that good of a player. Don't get it wrong. He is a fantastic prospect. And if the Jaguars were able to land him, it'd be a home run for the first round. Absolutely. But O'Cyrus Torrence, on the other hand, really takes your offensive line in the one spot that you have any worry about, especially because Barch went down and you only saw 5 games out of him, given they were pretty good in pass blocking. It takes the one spot you're probably worried about the most, and it turns that into a strength. And not only that, but that's a potential replacement down the road. If you want to move on from Scherf, he can play both guard spots. Gives you a little bit of flexibility in the future. So both those players fit needs, but at the same time, they're just fantastic prospects. And I think one of them could follow the Jaguars. So those are the 2 biggest guys we're going to look at. Now, another name that, quite frankly, was probably a bit disrespected by me the other day because I didn't know as much on the player, and I've still got to research certain guys, especially in the cornerback group. One guy I think that actually makes a lot of sense for the Jaguars in the first round is Cam Smith. And there's a few reasons why. One is the mentality, the way he plays. He's a big hitter. He's fantastic in man coverage, which is what Mike Caldwell is going to ask his guys to do. And not only can he play outside, but he can also play in the slot. He played, actually, if we look at it, I think it was about a third of his snaps in the slot this last year. But it's about double outside, but still a lot of time at both these positions. And you see that right there. So Cam Smith makes a ton of sense for the Jaguars. And he'd be another guy that you got things to work on in his game. He's not a perfect prospect, but hey, at the same time, Tyson Campbell, when he came here, that was not exactly a pick a ton of people liked at the time. He was a guy who was considered developmental. And what the Jaguars do with him, turn him into one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. So Cam Smith might be someone they go after. That could make a ton of sense. So just a name to consider as a backup option here. There's other guys we could consider for sure, but really those are the big ones we're going to talk about. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and start with this and see how these picks go. Won't be any trading really taking place outside of our picks, so you'll see Bears will stay put, take Will Anderson. So we'll start going through these. So Peter Skoronski, that's quite frankly too early for him, but hey, he's a good player, just not better than Jalen Carter. See, the quarterbacks are off the board. I actually like Richardson to the Panthers personally. Division loads up at receiver. Paris Johnson's off the board. Now, it's still too early to trade up. I think the earliest I would consider is probably 18. Joey Porter being on the board is crazy. Something tells me he's going right here, and he does. See Brian Branch go off the board. So, unfortunately, not going to be able to get Branch. Now, Witherspoon would be a heck of a pick. That would be fantastic, but yeah, we're not going to trade up for him here. Lucas Van Ness, Brian Brissy. Not huge on Brissy. We got Broderick Jones, Kayshon Boutte, and Emmanuel Forbes. So, 2 guys that I'd be big on taking here. Cam Smith and Osiris Torrance. Other names you can consider at this point. I think Michael Mayer would be a huge consideration, especially if you lose Evan Ingram. That said, I don't think Ingram's going anywhere. And you really got to know more about how much the Jaguars would utilize 2 tight end sets. Doug Pearson is pretty big on using his tight ends, but we would have to make sure the value's there. But nevertheless, love Michael Mayer as a player. Took him before and don't really regret it much. He's a great fit here. Bijan Robinson's a no, just because we are not drafting running back first round, as good as he is. Jackson Smith and Jigba, the problem there is that he's probably playing from the slot more. And so as much as having the first name Jackson has to put him in consideration, I don't think that he's going to come to Jacksonville. Keely Ringo, that's a bulky pick right there, betting on traits. That might make sense in a realistic mock draft, but that would not be the way I would go at this point, just because there's a lot of concerns with him and his downturn performance at the end of the year. After that, you could say Clark Phillips. I'm not high enough on him to where I want him in the first round, so we're not going to be going after Phillips, but hey, maybe if he falls in the second, we'd consider it. Anton Harrison, also another good player, but perhaps more of a left tackle in the NFL. And you've got two guys on your roster that could be your left tackles of the future, so we don't want to have need triumph over everything, and I'm sure Harrison could play out at right tackle, but wouldn't be too huge on him at that point. After that, you got some other names that are dark horses. Antonio Johnson could be a dark horse. Big thing with him, too, is that he could play slot, but he can cover tight ends really well. Maybe you like that. Nolan Smith as an edge rusher. Someone that would be a fantastic character fit here. And comp to Hassan Reddick, maybe he takes time, but if he's the better player at the end of the day, you want him. And then at this point, probably wouldn't draft anyone else. I'd consider DeJuan Jones maybe, but I don't know. I think you can do better. So last time I did this, it was not the it was real time instead. So different series technically, but we still just drafted him last time. So Cyrus Torrence, I think we're gonna skip on that. As much as I like Torrance, and we're gonna go a different route. We're gonna pick up Cam Smith. So getting Cam Smith here, now you've got three fantastic cornerbacks on your team. You've got a backup option outside if one of your players goes down. You can move Smith outside. You know Herndon can play in the slot if needed. So you have him as an option there. But Cam Smith, he's your slot starter at the beginning. He will be on the field the majority of plays. The Jaguars right now, it's about 3/4 of the time that they're running with a nickel on the field. So Cam Smith would be utilized a lot on the team. So that's going to be our direction here. So, last time we did a mock draft was the real time, and we went pretty much all offense at the beginning. So a little bit different of an approach. So, talking about needs you have after this pick. It would be nice on the defensive side of the ball, and this is probably the last thing you really got to hit. It would be nice to get someone to help the pass rush. And say if someone nice falls, then maybe we hit that. On the offensive side of the ball, I think you could find someone in free agency, especially if McKinnon or Perrine hit the free agent class. But you ideally like a second running back, which we're not going to draft this early. It's going to be probably third or fourth round if we hit that. Don't want to get it way too high with ETN in the building. But you could look at that. Receiver, I think you want someone to develop. Fantastic option for that would be Hutchinson, and I hope we get him later in this draft to talk about him again, quite frankly, because I like talking about him. He's just a great fit for the Jaguars. We probably got a little more insight than last time. At tight end, I think you want your second guy, but at the same time, someone brought up to my attention, Luke Farrell, as much as he seems like not really a contributor on the team, as a blocker he's done pretty well when he's been on the field. So your need for a blocking tight end, maybe it is not as large as you think, because you've already got someone in-house that you're going to have around the next 2 years that you can put out on the field as a blocker. So there's that, and then I think this team would really benefit from a player on the offensive line who can play at guard and be a swing tackle. And that would have been Osiris Torrance, because as crazy as it may sound, Torrance has actually said he can play out at tackle if needed. Not that that's his ideal role necessarily, but he can do it. And of course he's going to try to hype up his profile as a prospect, but that was another option that's really enticing there. So those are kind of our needs at this point. But you can argue you hit the biggest need here, and you get a guy with way higher upside than just a slot corner. Because maybe later on you're looking at moving Cam Smith to the outside. If you want to move on from Darius Williams, say he has a bad year or something, and then you're just finding slot corner again. So we'll go ahead and start moving forward. That pick makes a lot of sense. They need to definitely hit receiver. John Michael Schmitz off the board super early. Actually before Torrance. And that closes out the first round. So we still got, as guys to consider trading up for, Michael Mayer, Anton Harrison perhaps, Clark Phillips. I think he's off the board now for us since we hit corner. Nolan Smith would definitely be someone I'd consider. DeJuan Jones as well. So we'll have to see where people go. And the way it's falling right now, probably gonna jinx myself, but I think there's a legit shot that we trade up here. Okay, Nolan Smith's gone. So DeJuan Jones and B.J. Ojulari. Two names I would trade up for. I don't want to give up too much capital. So we're going to look at draft pick value here. Get this pulled up. Should have had it up before. So this selection here would be 39. Worth 510. We have 340. See, here's the problem. You're giving up a third to trade that far up. I don't think you want to do that. Go a few more picks. Oh, hate that right there. Now, B.J. Ojulari being this far down the board. That pick would be 44. I'd absolutely consider that. So let's look into this. So my issue here, I don't want to part ways with this third rounder. I don't think that's a great move for the team. At the same time, I don't think to move up 12 spots, you're giving up both your 4th round picks. And as well, this 5th, actually this will be swapped because of the Calvin Ridley compensation that will update. So I'll factor that, throw in this 4th. Let's put it in the 6th. So essentially what you're doing here, you want to move up 12 spots in the 2nd round. You're giving up your early 4th. You're giving up your early 6th. So maybe that's not enough. Obviously, you see the numbers are in favor of us. I don't think that's completely accurate though, because I've seen other trades where there is not that much compensation having go away. I mean, you take, for example, like the team trade into the 1st round with us to select, or sorry, we trade into the 1st round with the Bucks, moved up 6 spots. That's from the 2nd round, and we gave up a 4th and a 6th. So this is later in the draft. Picks are worth a lot less. So that was going up to 27. This is going up to 44, which would have been 45 if the Dolphins' pick wasn't voided. So I think you could justify this. Now maybe if they had other picks here that we could kind of swap, I'd consider moving back somewhere, but I don't want to move out of the 3rd round. So if this was close and you needed to throw in something extra, I could throw in a late pick from the next year. I could consider that, but this is what we're going to do. See, that's accepted. So on this pick, we're going to go B.J. Ojulari. Other options you could consider, which I would not have traded up for, Luke Musgrave would have made a lot of sense for the team. Been a really good fit at tight end. Some people like Keon White a lot. It's another name you could definitely look at. At this point, though, I think those are really the 2 names I would think of. And then Derek Hall as well. But BJ Ojulari, he's not perfect with size. There's some issues there. But as a pass rusher, he's extremely developed. And we've even seen him go in our first draft at the 24th pick. So landing him with the 44th selection of this draft is a steal. And so what we've done, essentially on the defensive side of the ball, if you bring in Ojulari and Cam Smith, you got your slot corner, and then, now that we've drafted him, you have Trayvon Walker likely moving to the line a little more often, and you have Ojulari playing as your 3-4 outside linebacker. I think it would be great for this team, too, if you brought in someone who was a veteran as a pass rusher. Justin Houston is my guy for that right now. Could be other names you could consider, but he makes the most sense to me. But if you have all those guys, your defensive side of the ball looks fantastic at this point. You got a lot of really good names. And once again, huge thing with Ojulari. As a pass rusher, he is extremely developed. Just a fantastic player as far as knowing what to do, making the tackles think, just very creative in the way he plays. If you watch videos on him, and I think as well, I believe he was in our top draft prospects for the Jaguars. That's probably not the exact name of the video, but if you look on our channel, we've got a video on some of the draft prospects that would be fits for the Jaguars. Ojulari is just a heck of a player. And so you add someone to that room who's already a developed pass rusher. That's a need on the team. You get another name to develop. And especially, just say, unfortunately, if Josh Allen doesn't develop, you have someone who can replace him. I don't think that will be the case at all. I think Josh Allen's going to be here to stay for a long time. But it is possible, and getting Ojulari would give you a safety blanket there. So I think this is a fantastic draft right off the bat. A lot of really great picks for the team and players who can play in a huge impact. So at this point, we're not going to be trading out of the next selection unless there's really good reason to do it, because we've already given up some capital. I'd like in the future not to give up as much capital and actually make all 9 selections, because it's sort of been the same thing a lot of the time. But hey, you're getting good players, so it's worth it. So I've already got a name in mind for this next selection. Hopefully he doesn't go off the board. Be very unfortunate. Andrew Voorhees dropped pretty far. Okay, consider trading up for him. And there he goes. Dang it. So what I wanted to do here was get Xavier Hutchinson. Xavier Hutchinson, just fantastic fit with the Jaguars. And to talk about him for a second, he's a player that would fill in really well for Marvin Jones. It's an easy comp for him as a player, very similar in the way he plays, his contested catch ability. Just fantastic. And if you play him in the slot, compares really well to Keenan Allen. And he's a big guy for the slot if you're moving him into that kind of role. So with this selection, we're kind of in a weird spot because that's what you wanted to do. And if I could go back, I would absolutely trade up to get him. But at this point, this might be a really hard selection to make. Maybe Tucker Kraft ends up being your guy. I don't want to go too far down the board, but there are some guys who are ranked really low. So, Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, another favorite of mine. Really nice corner. Undersized, though. I don't think he's going to be selected because you've got Cam Smith already. I think it's best to hit the offensive side of the ball. Tank Dell. That could be a sneaky pick here. Probably a fun one as well. Maybe another route you can go. Now the thing with him is where he plays on the field. You see the size here is 5'10". He's going to be in the slot. The issue with him is that you've already got Christian Kirk playing there, so how much are you going to put him out on the field? Over Christian Kirk? That's the big question. Now, you go farther down the board, A.T. Perry is fantastic size for the position you see here. Not as highly rated of a prospect, though. He's someone we would definitely consider. Tucker Kraft, good all-around tight end. Really good consolation prize for the third round as well. I also like Kenny McIntosh. That would be a really good fit with this offense. But at the same time, I'm not sure I want to pick him this early. Just think it's too soon. And you go farther down the board, I don't know if there's really anyone hiding in there that I would be huge on. So, I think I'm going to look at A.T. Perry, possibly. It's going to be him or Tucker Kraft here at this selection. So, let's look at both their draft profiles. Make this easy. So we can compare these players. Aren't guys I usually have to go to, but this is kind of where we're at. So this is good. X receiver, outside guy, red zone threat. This is actually very similar to what we've seen from Marvin Jones. Now, separation, drops, yeah, don't like any of that. They do run a lot of the quick passing game, the RPO, so that's a good fit. I think he's criminally underrated, being considered a 5th round prospect. Now, Tucker Kraft, this is probably where we'll go. Because for him, you look at especially like where he comes from, and you don't want to helmet scout too much, but Tucker Kraft comes from a place where there's been really good tight ends. So you like that. Dallas Goedert's the guy you mentioned, and hey, former Doug Pearson tight end. Kraft as a player, he's athletic. He's one of these really well-balanced tight ends still, and I think he's got a lot of upside. And here's a big thing here that's going to sell me on him: the run game. That's something I want to improve on offense. Big focus for me. And so this is going to be Tucker Kraft here. That's who we're going to go with. So we're going to hit our first spot on the offense. And like I said, ideally this is Xavier Hutchinson. That's the perfect pick in the 3rd round, in my opinion. But Tucker Kraft, you get your second tight end. Get someone who's better at blocking. Now you can run a 2 tight end system if you want. I wouldn't do it all the time necessarily, but it opens it up for that. In the offensive side of the ball, you'd like to get a receiver to develop. Not sure if you're going to find that at this point in the draft unless someone falls. You'd like someone on the offensive line. Actually, I think I know who we're going to go with for that. But we'll see if they're available. So, later on we will just skip to the pick. But here, we're just going to go pick by pick, in case we see anyone fall. So, at this point, A.T. Perry and Kenny McIntosh are still here right now. A.T. Perry's off. Oh, you see that 4th rounder's gone. Okay. So we actually have 1 4th rounder here. Kind of forgot about that. But hey, we got B.J. Ojulari, so that's fine. 2 guys to consider here. Hard choice once again. Kenny McIntosh. Top guy on the board here. I think he is a fantastic fit at running back for this offense. He's someone who will have an impact right off the bat for this team. Zach Pickens you could also throw into this conversation. Someone who could develop really well on the defensive line. Dontavian Wicks. Another receiver you might like. I like the way he plays. I think he'd be a solid fit for this team. Some people like Deuce Vaughn a lot too. I agree. I just don't know if the Jaguars would go after him. Now, Roschon Johnson is perhaps another guy that could arguably fit better at running back because he's more of a big presence. He can still receive the ball well, but he's a better blocker. And we've gone after McIntosh a lot, so maybe that's where we go. But the other guy I was going to consider here is Wanya Morris. So Wanya Morris, another one of these, has the size, has the athleticism, all those things, but can he develop at the position? And he'd be a fantastic selection, I think, at this point in the draft as a developmental guy for the offensive line. Not sure he's playing guard, so maybe you're not going to go that route at this point. So what we will do, usually I'm big on Kenny McIntosh, and I'd probably select him here most of the time. We're going to go a different route for this team. We're going to get Roschon Johnson. So Roschon Johnson, a little more on him. He is the backup to Bijan Robinson in Texas for the Longhorns. And quite frankly, a prospect that people might look at as a number one running back in the NFL. That good of a player. He's a bigger guy, has great size for the position. You're not going to find any issues there. Might be something that sells him to the Jaguars. But he fits all the things that you're missing at running back. Because Roschon Johnson, like we said, he can receive the ball. He could be a part of the game that way. And he can block. He's a fantastic blocker. And if you're adding that to this offense, that could be a huge deal on third downs. Especially in clear passing situations. If they got a running back in the backfield. So, I think Roschon Johnson, kind of a different pick there, but someone they could go after. Now, we're going to go ahead. We're going to skip to these next picks. We got late picks. We're just going to look for best player available. See Wanya Morris off the board now. It's a long wait. Because they aren't going to have a fifth rounder this year, so there's going to be a dead gap in the draft. Alright, here we go. So, got 3 selections left here. At this point, players that stand out. O'Shawn Mathis does to me. Another guy that would be developmental. Trevor Reed would be a prospect for the offensive line. It's probably the 2 directions we're going to go. Maybe you could go Jonathan Mingo. I gotta learn more about him as a player. Let's go ahead, actually. Let's look up Jonathan Mingo. Might have spelled that wrong. Yeah, he might be another possession guy. Speed's not great. Yeah. Well, but he's also run after the catch. Probably gonna go a different direction. Need to learn more about the later prospects. We're just gonna hammer that defensive line here. Gonna get O'Shawn Mathis, another guy that we can develop here. Why not, quite frankly? And then we're gonna shoot with this next pick, I think for Trevor Reed. Another name you could consider here would be Ronnie Hickman. Be a good addition to the secondary, especially at this point in the draft. I think he's going to go a round or 2 earlier. And then people are also talking, is it Michael Jefferson? It might be another name at this point. Someone stood out. It might be Michael Jefferson. We're going to figure this out. We got a lot of research being done mid-video today. So he was at the Senior Bowl. And there was someone at the Senior Bowl who really stood out. I want to figure out who it is. It might have been Michael Jefferson. And if I get this wrong and you know who this is, please let me know in the comments. Yeah, I think it is Jefferson. No, that's different. Okay. Well, if it was him, that's unfortunate. We're not going to go that direction here. We're just going to get Trevor Reed again for the offensive line. I will figure out who the heck that is after this, but we're just going to get through the rest of this. So, Trevor Reed, someone who you can develop, has the size. Once again, that's what you're looking for at this point of the draft. That's the kind of pick that you want to make, the selection. Now we'll go to our next selection. And for me, this is pretty simple. It's a guy I'm going to go to a lot late in the draft that I'd like to get, and maybe it is Michael Jefferson. We'll see. But Trey Tucker, not got great size for a wide receiver, but I think he could be a sneaky guy that could actually find a spot on a roster. From what I've seen of him as a prospect, and in his film from college, I actually like him a lot. I think he should go, in the middle of day 3, and that's probably where he will go, especially with receivers being picked up so early. But that's where we're going to go with this last selection here. So, this whole draft. So, a lot of focus on the defensive side of the ball right off the bat. It's really where we took it to at the beginning. And I think you'd be thrilled, especially if you're Mike Caldwell, if this is your defense, because Cam Smith fits your need right off the bat in coverage. He's a man guy. He can play in the slot. You have the developmental upside to put him outside. He can already play out there anyway, but you're going to start him in the slot. Should be really good there. And as a player, he fits the mentality of this team. So you love that first selection. Then you trade up for B.J. Ojulari. He was the faller in this draft, the guy we targeted. He's a really good pickup for this team. Fantastic pass rusher, very well refined in his moves there. The question with him is, can he become good against the run? But hey, early on in his career, maybe you're only using him on passing downs. Maybe that's his usage at the beginning, but I think you could get him to work out against the run. I think that'll come with time. So, you get 2 really fantastic plugs for the defense. Quite frankly, exactly what you want. And on the offensive side of the ball, you hit a position that has a lot of need. And I think you get arguably the best player on the board again with Tucker Kraft. And then after that, go back to the offense and you hit the running back position. You get a guy who can do all the things you're lacking from Travis Etienne. So you complete the defense at the beginning of this, and with the last half, you're adding well to the offense. Now, what you wish you could have hit earlier in this draft would have been a receiver, getting someone that you could develop. That would have been Xavier Hutchinson for me. That's the guy I want to target. Or it would have been going after a guard. And someone that would have actually made sense to trade up for, although I don't think we would have just because of the draft capital we had at that point after trading for Ojulari. But Andrew Voorhees fell pretty far in this. He would have been a nice selection early in the 3rd round. But Tucker Kraft is a great consolation prize at that point. And to finish off the draft, you got 2 guys here. Got the size, need the development, and you get Trey Tucker, who I think could be a sneaky guy to make the roster. So, overall, it's not a perfect draft. Definitely some things that I wish I could change, just specifically as far as players going right before picks or any of that. But, hey, I mean, I think it brings a lot of value. I don't think I would be disappointed in this draft. It'd be very good for the organization, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And you've already got your additions on offense, or at least the big one, which would be Calvin Ridley. You got your number 1 receiver, at least you hope. So, with that done, maybe the team needs to focus more on the defensive side of the ball. So, I like the draft. I think it's pretty good. But with that said, we're going to wrap this up. Appreciate you watching. If you got any suggestions for things you want to see on here, absolutely let me know. We're trying to figure that out. What we want to do with this channel really is feature things for the fans that, quite frankly, you're not going to find in other places. I try to think of stuff that I want to find as a fan. I try to talk about that and do research on it. So if you got something that you want to be talked about, let me know. I'll absolutely consider it and try to get it on here. And love talking to you guys as well. A lot of my free time is Jags football, quite frankly, even in the off season. So, and I think that's the same for a lot of us anyway, especially when they're good. So, yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if you would have done anything different as well, if you like the picks, all that stuff. Appreciate you watching, and go Jags.